Today is the 19th day of Av, the month of Av, which means that tonight, or even just in a couple hours, is going to be the 20th day of Av. In Judaism, we start the day at the evening. The sun is going to set soon. The sun's way down. After the sun sets, we begin the new day of the 20th of Av. 20th of Av is a significant day in that it's the yahrzeit, is the anniversary of the passing of a great Torah sage by the name of Rabbi Levi Yitzchok Schneerson. Rabbi Levi Yitzchok, um, although he was quite well known in his time on his own right, he is more famously known today as the father of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and that's where he's most commonly known today. But even before his son became so famous as the Rebbe, he was also as I said, he was quite a well-known man. He was a great rabbi. He was the chief rabbi of the city of, originally it was called Yekaterinoslav, which is in Ukraine today. But then in 1920 something, I remember I checked it up, they changed the name from Yekaterinoslav to Dnipropetrovsk. And then more recently, a couple of years ago, they changed the name again to Dnieper or Dniepro or something like that, which is, I believe, it's the fourth largest city in Ukraine today. So it's quite a large city. It was an important city. He was the rabbi of this city of Yekaterinoslav or Dnipropetrovsk. He was a great Torah scholar. He was a Kabbalist. He wrote many insights on the Torah, which we'll talk about in a moment. And he was he's a deep thinker and a very pious man. At the time when the Soviets took power, the Soviets tried to shut down Judaism across the entire Soviet Union. They tried to stop people from practicing Judaism, and there was only a few people who stood up to the Soviet power and did everything they can to keep Judaism alive. And Rabbi Levi Yitzchok was one of those people. Rabbi Levi Yitzchok, he was known as Rabbi Levik. He was, there's many stories of how he stood up to the Soviets, surprisingly quite successful. There's one famous story where the Soviet government came to Rabbi Levi Yitzchok and they said, we want you to give your approval on we're going to bake matzahs for Passover. And we want you to approve it as the rabbi, to give your approval to say that these matzahs are kosher for Passover. Rabbi Levi Yitzchok said, I will do that only if they really are kosher for Passover. And so here's a list of what I need to do in order to make sure that the matzahs are going to be baked correctly. And they said, that's not how it works over here. Over here, we do what we do, and you're going to just sign it. And he says, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to agree to it. And I ended up going all the way up to the highest levels of the Soviet government, where in the end, he actually, they agreed to his demands, and they gave him full control, everything he requested, in order to make sure that the matzahs that were provided were completely kosher for Passover. There was we think about a great, holy, pious rabbi. You think about how he would be more involved with the more pious individuals in the community, the people that are, the religious, the people that are more stringent on following the law. But he was the rabbi of the entire community. And so when he realized there was a problem in the city, the Soviet government did not allow people to take off work for Shabbat or for the festivals. And so it came Yom Kippur. People wanted to pray in the synagogue, but they couldn't. They had to get to work. They had to leave to work early in the morning. And there was no time to pray on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. So Rabbi Levi Yitzchok, he went and he made a special service, an early morning service, like 5 a.m. He made an early morning service for these people that they could also pray before going off to work and starting their day in the factories in the Soviet Union. So this was Rabbi Levi Yitzchok, and this was the way he stood up to the Soviet government. But eventually they had enough, and they came up with some false accusations about Rabbi Levi Yitzchok. They arrested him. They put him through tremendous torture, and they eventually sent him off to exile to a small remote village called Chile, in Kazakhstan. They send him off to this village where there was no Jewish life and there was no really any civilized life at that point. And he suffered tremendously on the way there, before and after, while he was there. And he was a very sick and broken man at the end. And eventually, they gave him permission to transfer to any place he wants as long as he stays in Kazakhstan. And so he moved to the city called Almaty, where there was a Jewish community and there were people there who were able to help him, take care of him. And he lived there the rest of his life, which was not very long, until he eventually passed away on the 20th of Av in the year 1944. So this is his 81st anniversary, the 81st yahrzeit of Rabbi Levi Yitzchok Schneerson, who was the father of the Rebbe. As we mentioned, Rabbi Levi Yitzchok was a great scholar, and he wrote many new Torah thoughts throughout his years. But all of his writing was left behind in his study in Dnepropetrovsk, in Yekaterinslav, when he was arrested. And all those writings were eventually taken by the Soviets, and later on they were taken by the Nazis, and they're all gone today. We don't have any of that. It's all lost. However, we do have a special treasure of writings from Rabbi Levi Yitzchok, and that is while he was in exile in Kazakhstan, he still wanted to study Torah, and he wanted to keep learning and writing new Torah thoughts. So his wife came, and his wife brought him a couple of Sfarim, a couple of holy books, just a handful of books. And he didn't have any paper, he didn't have any pen, so his wife went and she found berries out in the field. She crushed the berries and made ink from these berries. And when you make natural ink from berries, they come different colors. There was green ink, there was purple ink, red ink, and she just whatever color ink she was able to make. And he didn't have paper, so he wrote in the margins of his books. He wrote Torah Insights, and we can see the books today. They're on display in the library in New York, the Rebbe's library in New York, and you can see these books where there's every inch of every millimeter of empty space was filled by writing with these colorful inks that he wrote his Torah thoughts. And this is all we have today. We have the margins after he passed away. His wife, she's known as Rebbe Tzanchana, the Rebbe's mother, took these books with his writings on the side. She took it with her when she eventually left the Soviet Union, made her way to America, where she lived the rest of her life in America. And she brought these books with her, and we have them till today, and we can see and we can learn. Today it's been published in its own books, and there's books written on his writings, which is also very consent, very it's written in a very condensed form because he didn't have a lot of space. He had to work with what he had. But we have some of this Torah knowledge today that we're able to study from Rabbi Levi Yitzchok. So that is just who Rabbi Levi Yitzchok is. Tonight, as I mentioned, tonight is his yahrzeit, and so we are going to be dedicating the class tonight to Rabbi Levi Yitzchok. As the Rebbe would do every year on this day, on the 20th of Av, the Rebbe would talk, and the Rebbe would give Torah insights on this day in honor of his father. And we're going to talk about one of those things that the Rebbe taught on this date, on the 20th of Av. And so when you look at the Talmud, we open up a Talmud, and there's many different things discussed in the Talmud and many things that are mentioned, and there are many dates that are mentioned. And so if we look through the Talmud and try to find what does the Talmud say about this day, the 20th day of Av, what mention of this is in the Talmud? The answer is there is only one mention in the entire Talmud. There is only one mention of this day of the 20th of Av. Now, I did not study the entire Talmud. I certainly don't know it all by heart. But the Rebbe did, and the Rebbe studied the Talmud, and the Rebbe said that it only mentions it once in the entire Talmud. This date is mentioned, and so we are going to discuss this mention of the date and the significance and the lesson we can learn from what's mentioned in the Talmud about this date. So with that introduction, let's jump right in and see what the Talmud says. So this is in the tractate of Ta'anit, which generally deals with fast days, with days of prayer. But it also mentions other things as well. And this is actually a mention of a happy occasion that took place on the 20th of Av. And it mentions as follows. there were many holidays amongst the Jewish people, right? And generally, a holiday amongst the Jewish people is a holiday for all. We all celebrate together. But there was also a personal holiday. Certain times people have a holiday, but something that's meaningful to themselves. For example, if somebody got saved from a great tragedy on a certain day, so they're they were very sick and they got healed, they were in jail, they were released, you're going to celebrate that day. It becomes a day that's important for you and your family. This is a celebration that was a family celebration. And it was as follows. In the temple, the Bet HaMikdash in Jerusalem, they would bring all sorts of sacrifices. In order to bring a sacrifice, in order to burn a sacrifice on the altar, you needed to have wood, right? You couldn't just bring an animal on the altar and light it on fire. That wouldn't work. You had to make a big fire with wood. They'd pile up the wood and light it on fire, and then put the sacrifices onto this onto the flames, onto the fire. Where would the wood come from for the sacrifices? Where would they get the wood in order to do all these sacrifices? The answer is that there was 9 different times throughout the year where a different family would have the privilege of bringing the wood for the altar. And they would come and they would bring wagons full of wood. And when they would arrive, every year on this day, they had a certain day that this was their day to deliver the wood to the temple. And when they would come and bring the wood to the temple, it was a big celebration. It was a very momentous occasion for this family that they would celebrate that they have the honor, they have the schut, the merit of bringing the wood for the temple on this day. And this was a voluntary thing. And in fact, there was, over the years, sometimes other families tried to get in on the action. They felt like they wanted to bring it as well. And the rabbi said, no, their merit, they did it first. They chose to do it first. It is their honor. They can keep doing this honor. This is always going to be their special thing to bring the wood on these dates. And so the Talmud tells us 9 different dates and who would bring it on each one of these dates. And one of these 9 dates was the 20th of Av. The Talmud says that on the 20th of Av, the family called Bnei Pachat Moav ben Yehuda, the family of Pachat Moav, the son of Yehuda, they would bring the wood on the 20th day of Av. And that's all the Talmud says about this day. But then, there is a discussion. There is a discussion amongst the rabbis, namely Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi. And they start discussing who was this family of Pachad Moav ben Yehuda. Where did they come from? Who are they? What's their lineage? What's their background? So Rabbi Meir says, you know who this family was? This family were descendants of King David. They were actually descendants of King David. That's who this family were. They have a great lineage. Rabbi Yossi says, no. You know who this family comes from? They have a lineage. Their lineage is from Yoav ben Tzeruya. Who is Yoav ben Tzeruya? Well, we all know who King David was, right? King David was the greatest king of Israel. He was the king who led the Jewish people, who established Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. He was the one who prepared the place for the building of the temple in Jerusalem. He chose the place. He prepared it. His son Shlomo later came and built the temple. Who was Yoav? Yoav was actually King David's nephew. Tzeruya, who was Yoav's mother, was actually David's sister. And so David's sister Tzeruya had a son named Yoav, and Yoav was King David's general. He was the commander-in-chief of David's army. So you have here King David. You have Rabbi Meir says that this family is descendants of King David. And then you have Rabbi Yossi says, no, they're actually descendants of King David's nephew, whose name was Yoav, who was King David's general, the commander of his armies. And this is the argument that we find in the Talmud regarding this family that brought the wood on the 20th day of Av. Now the question is, hold on a second. How do you have an argument about a fact? We can argue about opinions. We can argue about what is better, chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream. We can argue, I like chocolate, you like vanilla, we can have an argument. But we can't have an argument about a fact. I can't say this is chocolate ice cream, you say it's vanilla ice cream. Well, just check the label, right? Check the package, see what it says. Does it say chocolate, does it say vanilla? What is it? It's one or the other. You can't argue about it. When you have a fact, we can't argue about facts. We can only argue about how I feel about it. If I think it should be right, it should be wrong. It's not an argument about what it is. And so who are they? Do they come from David or do they come from Yoav? Who do they come from? Which one is correct? Now remember, we're not talking about people who don't know what they're talking about. This is we're talking about Torah scholars, great Torah scholars, and it's recorded in the Talmud. Means that there's fact to this. This is a real argument amongst the sages. And so the Rebbe explains that in fact, it's not a problem. They're not really arguing about the facts of who they come from, because the truth is they come from both. It's not a problem. They come from both David and Yoav. They come from both. How could they come from the uncle and the nephew? Somewhere along the line, there was a wedding between two distant cousins, and so they come from two different sides. It's not a big deal. It's not a problem that they come from David and from Yoav at the same time. I actually have this in my own family, in my own lineage. Always, there was a tradition in my family for many years that we come from, there was two great Hasidic leaders. Their names were Meshulam Zusha from the city of Anipoli, which my son Zusha is named after him. And also from his brother, who was another great leader, his name was Elimelech from the town of Luzhensk. So people, how can you come from two brothers? How could you be a descendant of two brothers? But it's not a problem. We're talking about 8, 9 generations ago, somewhere, 3, 4 generations down, two distant cousins got married. It's not a problem. And today we can come from both brothers at the same time. And so the Rebbe says that in fact, they're both correct. They come from both David and Yoav. So then what's the argument? What are they arguing about? They're arguing about which side is the significant side in this story. In other words, we're talking about the generosity of this family, that they came and they brought the wood on the 20th day of Av. So we want to know on which influence is this coming? Which genes, which part of their lineage is the part that's making them who they are, that they want to go and donate wood for the temple? Does it come from their side that comes from David? Or does this come from the side of the family that comes from Yoav? Where did they inherit this trait of being willing to come and donate the wood to the temple? There's a story told of a rabbi who gets called to work out an argument between a couple. There's a young husband and wife. They just had a baby boy, and they're having an argument. And they come to the rabbi and say, "Rabbi, we need you to work this out for us. What's the problem? Tomorrow is going to be the Brit Milah. Our son was born a week ago. We're going to have the Brit Milah. We don't know what to name our son. We can't come to an agreement." So the rabbi says, "Okay, so what do you each say?" So the husband says, "Well, I want to name him after my grandfather, who was a great rabbi. He was a great Torah scholar. He was a special man. He was a great person. And I want to name him after my grandfather, whose name was Chaim." Okay, the rabbi says, "That sounds very good." Turns to the wife, "And who do you want to name the baby after?" She says, "Well, I want to name him after my favorite uncle. He was a very kind person. He was a very joyous person. He was always there to help somebody. And I was very close to him for many years. And I really loved my uncle. And I want to name after my uncle." So the rabbi says, "Okay, that sounds very nice." So the husband says, "But what do you mean? Your uncle was a simple man. He can barely read. He never learned any Torah. He wasn't the rabbi. I don't want to name my son after somebody like that. I want to name my son after a great rabbi. I want him to be a Torah scholar." So the rabbi asked the wife, "And what was your uncle's name?" She says, "My uncle, his name was Chaim." So the rabbi says, "Okay, so 1 second. You want to name him Chaim? You want to name him Chaim? Yeah, but I want to name him Chaim after my grandfather, and I want to name him Chaim after my uncle. So what should we do? What should we name our son?" So the rabbi thinks for a moment, and the rabbi says, "You know what? I have a solution. Tomorrow at the Brit Milah, I want you to name your son Chaim." They said, "But after who? Who is he named after? Is it the grandfather or the uncle?" The rabbi says, "Don't worry. You'll name him Chaim, and you wait a couple of years. You'll see how he grows up. If he grows up to be a great rabbi, you know he's after the grandfather. If he grows up to be a kind person and gives a lot of tzedakah but can't learn, you know he comes after the uncle." So lineage matters. Where does it come from? They're both correct. Yes, they're both correct. His name is Chaim. He comes from the grandfather. He comes from the uncle. It's all beautiful. But what is his background? Where does it come from? What is defining his characteristics, the way he acts, the way he does things? And so this was the question that they were arguing about regarding this family. Their generosity of donating the wood for the temple, did this come from the fact that they descended from David? Or did this come from the fact that they descended from Yoav, who was the general? And we see, by the way, this concept as well when it comes to Pinchas. We learned about Pinchas a couple of weeks back, about a month or two ago, about Pinchas, who was the grandson of Aaron, that he stood up against Zimri. He killed Zimri because he was bringing a plague on the Jewish people. And over there we see Rashi brings a similar discussion of what was his lineage. Why? Because he actually came from two people. On one side, he came from Yitro, who was also the father-in-law of Moshe, who was not Jewish, later converted. On the other side, he came from Joseph. And so the question asked over there was which side was important when it came to his decision of deciding to kill Zimri? Did it come from the fact that he descended from Yitro, or did it come from the fact that he descended from Yosef? Do we see a similar idea over there? And ultimately over there, God says it actually he comes from Aaron. Aaron was his grandfather, and that's actually the most relevant point there. But the question is, taking a step back, we mentioned earlier that there were 9 different times that different families would bring this wood for the temple. And yet here we are discussing one specific family, the family that brought it on the 20th day of Av. What's so significant about this donation over the others? What's different between this donation and suddenly now this donation is so special that we have to know where they come from? What's so significant about the family bringing the wood on the 20th day of Av over the other 8 that are mentioned? The answer is as follows. The wood, to prepare wood to bring to the temple, you can really only do that in the summer. You can't do that in the winter. Because in the winter, the wood is moist. When the wood is moist, first of all, you can't use it to burn. You'd have to dry out the wood, which is very laborious and be a big deal to deal with that. You'd have to cut it earlier, and it was a lot of work to make that happen. In addition, in order to bring wood onto the altar in the temple, the Bet HaMikdash, the wood had to be dry and clean from worms. There couldn't be any worms in the wood. Now, if the wood, once the sun is not beating so hard, once it starts to cool down, that's when the worms are more likely to end up in the wood. And so therefore, the rule was any wood that was cut after the 15th day of Av, which is the hottest period of the summer, any wood that is cut after that period, once it starts to cool down a little bit, that wood already is not accepted to be burnt in the temple. You can't bring wood after that date. Only wood that was prepared before the 15th day of Av, that can be brought in the temple. So here we are talking about the 20th day of Av, which is 5 days later. It's 5 days after the deadline, which means that this wood that they're bringing on the 20th of Av had to already have been prepared 5 days previously. A week earlier, they're already preparing the wood to bring to the temple. And at this point, whatever they have, this is all they're going to have. You can't have more. You can't cut any more wood to bring to the temple. It's over. The deadline has passed. So whatever you have at this point, this is all you're going to have. So yes, it's generous for everybody who brings wood to the temple. But at this point, these are the first people bringing after the deadline. So when they bring their wood after the deadline, means they already prepared it a week earlier, and they were giving everything they have now. They were not going to be able to get more until next year. They were giving it with the knowledge, knowing that there will be no more wood cut this year. So this is the significance of their donation over the others. Now, there were others that came later as well, but they were the first ones to come after the deadline, after this hot season of the summer. And because of this, there is a special significance to this donation. It shows on a special generosity that they have, that they're giving it at a point where they have nothing left. They're giving it at this point where there's no more to be had. So if you think for a moment, if somebody is giving away toilet paper, very nice. They're giving toilet paper to people, but big deal, right? Everybody can get toilet paper is not such a big deal. I can also give you some toilet paper. It's not the end of the world. But think back 5 years ago to 2020. Think back to COVID when there was no toilet paper. You go to the store and it's out. They're empty. There's nothing there on the shelf. Imagine someone giving away toilet paper at that day. Wow. What a tzaddik. You're giving out toilet paper when there isn't anything available. You know that you can't get more. To give away what you have when you can't replace it, that's special. So that's the idea over here. They were right now giving something that there was no more to be had. They were giving the last that there was. This is about them specifically. In general, about these wood donations, they're all special. Why? There's a few different levels to this. Number one, people would bring donations all the time to the temple. They would bring a karban, they would bring in beautiful animals, and they would bring all sorts of things. There was a special occasion when they would bring it, and it was show everybody, look at this beautiful animal and bring it to the temple. And they would go and they would serve people from the meat afterwards. It was a special occasion. They got to enjoy the meat and share it with others. It was so nice. Here, these people are not bringing an animal. They were bringing wood, just wood. The wood is not a sacrifice. The wood just gets used on the altar to burn everybody else's sacrifices. So my wood, I'm bringing wood for you to bring a sacrifice. I am bringing wood that's going to be used by everybody else. In addition, who's the everybody else? Who was generally bringing a sacrifice? Most people who brought sacrifices were actually people who sinned. People who did a sin that now had to do tshuva. They had to reconnect with God. They would do that with bringing a sacrifice. So who's going to use my wood that I donated to the temple? The sinners, the bad people. That's who's going to use the wood that I brought to the temple. How does that feel? Not only that, when they brought the wood, as we mentioned previously, it was a holiday. It was a festival. They celebrated. They were joyful. It was so nice. So here they're bringing all they have left. They're bringing wood. That's not a beautiful sacrifice. They're not going to have any, plaque in the temple that they brought the wood. Nobody's going to even notice that they brought wood. The wood is going to be used by other people, not just them. Other people include sinners, bad people. And on top of this, they do it with such joy. They bring it with joy, with celebration. This shows I'm a truly generous person. Somebody who does this must be very generous. And so here Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi are arguing, where did this come from? Where did they get the ability to be so generous, to be so giving? What is in their background that is their motivation to be doing this? And that is what the question is, and that is what the argument is between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi. What is the difference between Yoav and David? Why does it matter who they got it from? Why is it relevant? What's relevant is that David and Yoav actually had a big difference between them. David and Yoav were both great Torah scholars. It says, in fact, about Yoav, it says that he was actually the head of the Sanhedrin as well, which means the Jewish court. He was the chief justice. In addition to being the general, the chief of staff of the army, he was also the chief justice. He was a very learned Torah scholar. But what was he all about? He was all about serving in the army, about being a warrior. David was a great warrior, right? We know that David slew Goliath, right? We all know about the famous story. David was a warrior. But what did David do all day? David didn't go out to fight. David sat and learned Torah. He spent his whole day learning Torah. He was a great Torah scholar. So what is the difference between David and between David and Yoav? David went and he had self-sacrifice for sitting and learning Torah. He ignored the world. He ignored all the other great things. He was a very rich man. He was the king. He was able to do anything he wanted. He was able to live a life of luxury. Instead, what did he do? He spent his whole day learning Torah, writing Psalms, studying the Torah. This is what he did with his life, and he did it with complete self-determination and complete self-sacrifice, completely devoted to his Torah learning. Yoav, on the other hand, Yoav also had self-sacrifice, but not just self-sacrifice to sit and learn and study Torah. He didn't give up things, luxuries to sit and study Torah all day. He went out to battle where his life was literally on the line. Yoav was able to be killed at any moment. You go to battle, nobody knows what's going to happen, right? He could have been killed at any moment. He was putting his life on the line constantly for the safety and security of the land of Israel. And so we have two great people that are each doing self-sacrifice in their own way. And the Talmud says about David and Yoav, the Talmud says that if not for David, Yoav would not have succeeded in war. And if not for Yoav, David could not have studied Torah. In other words, Yoav's battles, his successes on the battlefield, were in the merit of David's Torah learning. But David's Torah learning was only able to do because Yoav was out fighting the battles for him. So they both needed each other. David couldn't do it without Yoav. Yoav couldn't do it without David. They each have an integral mission here. They each have a part of the puzzle that needs to happen. They each have to do their part in order to make it work, in order to accomplish what has to get done. Neither one was able to do it on their own. And so we have this similar idea today in the land of Israel. It's a constant debate. This is something that everybody's always talking about. The Torah scholars, the yeshiva students who don't want to go to the army and you have to serve in the army and do they not? And what's right and who's wrong? Should you serve in the army? Should you study Torah? The answer is you need both. The Talmud tells us you have to do both. You have to have those studying Torah and you have to have those serving in the army. You can't have one without the other. You can't have just the soldiers without the yeshiva students, but you also can't have yeshiva students without the soldiers. They are both integral parts. They are both integral ingredients in order to accomplish the task, which is the safety and security of the land of Israel. So which one's more important? If you say we need both, and each one needs the other, which one is the more important one? Which one is the greater of the two? And that's the question we're going to try to answer now. Which one is more important in order to accomplish the task, to accomplish the goals of protecting the land of Israel? And so to answer this, let's look at a similar idea somewhere else. Not about soldiers, but we see also an idea of sharing the burden in two different ways with the two tribes of Yisachar and Zevulun. Yisachar and Zvulun, they were two tribes in Israel, two brothers. They were very close to each other, and they actually had a deal. They worked out a deal with each other. Zvulun, the tribe of Zvulun, they were businessmen. They went out and they did big business deals, and they made a lot of money. They were very rich, very wealthy. The tribe of Yisachar were actually not wealthy at all. They didn't do any business. They were not business people. Rather, they would sit and study Torah. They were Torah scholars. So you had a tribe of Torah scholars and a tribe of businessmen. And so they said, let's make a deal. Let's work out something together. Tribe of Zvulun said, I will support you in your Torah learning. You don't have to work. I'll take care of you. I'll give you all your needs. I'll make sure you have everything you need taken care of. You can sit and study Torah all day. What do I want in return? I want to get some of the merit of your Torah learning. I will work. You'll study. I'll support you. You'll give me some of your Torah learning, the merit of some of the Torah learning. And this way we can both be part of this together. It's a deal. We work together as a partnership. We each do our part. And so that's how it was. Zevulun and Yisachar, they had this partnership. One studied Torah and one went out of business. And that's how they did it. But we find something very interesting. The Rabbi points out. If you look at the way the Torah describes this relationship, the Torah brings it in one verse. The Torah says, "Smach Zvulun b'tzeisecha." Zvulun, you should rejoice in your going out to do business, in your business dealings. V'Yisachar b'ohalacha, and Yisachar. I'm missing a word here from the verse. I don't have the verse in front of me, so I'm not exactly sure. But Yisachar b'ohalacha, Yisachar will sit and study Torah. Which one is mentioned first in the verse? Do we first mention the Torah study? Or do we mention the businessman who is supporting the Torah study? The verse mentions the businessman first. First it says, Vulan, will do business, and then it says Yisachar will study Torah. In other words, which one of the two are more important? Who is the greater in this relationship? Is it the one studying the Torah, or is it the one who's supporting the Torah scholar? The Torah actually tells us that the one who's supporting the Torah scholar is doing greater work, is more important in this relationship than the one who is actually studying the Torah. Zvulun is the more important partner here. Fascinating. And the same thing would apply here as well. When we talk about the soldiers and the Torah scholars, we need them both. We need soldiers that are on the battlefront. We need soldiers in the yeshiva that are studying Torah. But which one is more important? How could you compare? One is sitting and studying Torah. Perhaps the air conditioner is going. He is able to sit and study Torah, and it's a hard life. Don't get me wrong. Studying Torah and yeshiva all day is not so easy. It's not so simple. They suffer tremendously. But can you compare that to a soldier who's putting his life, actual life, on the line? Can you compare that to Yoav? Can you compare King David to Yoav? King David is sitting in the palace and studying Torah. Yoav is out there on the battlefront, putting his life on the line. At any moment, he can get shot, he can get killed. The Torah scholar is very important in this relationship. But which one is more important? Which one is the one who's really putting his life on the line? That is the soldier who is willing to risk his life for the safety of the land of Israel. But again, we need both. We need to have both. Because if we don't have the Torah scholars that are sitting and studying Torah in the merit of the soldiers, then the soldiers are going to fall in battle as well. The soldiers are not going to have the power of the Torah study behind them. They are not going to be successful. And so, this is a lesson for us as well. This is what we have to take from this whole story. We have to remember that we have to be willing to go and put ourselves on the line. We have to be willing to go and donate the wood to the temple, even if it's not so exciting, even if it's not so glamorous as the one who's bringing the actual sacrifices. I'm just bringing wood. And not only that, the wood that I'm bringing is not going to be used by me, it's going to be used by other people. It's going to be used by sinners. And I'm not going to get any recognition for it. There's not going to be nobody's going to be talking about how great I am that I brought the wood. Nonetheless, this is our mission we have to do. If you see something that has to happen, you got to go and do it. You have to go and take the action and get done whatever has to get done. And not only that, you have to do it with joy. You have to do it joyously and be happy and be excited to go and bring this wood for the temple in order to make it available for all those who need it. This is the ultimate mitzvah. This is the ultimate way of serving God and giving to the temple and giving to the Jewish people. There was a story told of a great chassid. His name was Rabbi Mendel Futerfas. We mentioned him before. Rabbi Mendel Futerfas, he lived in Soviet Russia, and it was a very difficult time, obviously, to be a religious Jew in the Soviet Union. And there was a way that people were able to escape, able to leave the country. If they were able to prove that they have Polish citizenship, there was a way out. So Rabbi Mendel got involved in helping people forge their passports to be able to leave the country, to be able to go to Poland and eventually go on to United States or Israel or anywhere else they wanted to go. At some point, he realized that the KGB was on him. He realized that his life was in danger, and they're about to catch him. And so he had an opportunity. He was able to take care of his own papers and go and get out, take his family and leave. But Mendel did not want to leave and leave this work behind, and so he sent his family, he sent his wife and children, he sent them out of the country, and he stayed behind. Where eventually he was arrested and he was sentenced to 10 years in Siberia. After 10 years, after he finished his 10-year sentence, he was released, and as soon as he came out, people thought, okay, so now he's going to lay low for a bit, right? You don't want to mess again with the Soviet, the Soviet Republic. You're going to lay low and then stay out of trouble. But Mendel did not do that. Instead, he right away found another issue that needed to be dealt with. He realized that there was a lack of there was a problem with the kosher mikvah for the women in the city where he was living at that time, city called Chernovitz. The mikvah wasn't working or something. There's a problem with the mikvah, and so he took upon himself to go and raise money and to fix the mikvah for the women of the city. Now we realize here, first of all, why me? I just served a 10-year sentence. I'm not the one who should get involved in this. Number two, I'm not even gaining from it because I'm a man. The mikvah is only for the women. I'm not a woman. And my wife is not going because she was living in England already at the time. His family moved to England. And my kids, they also all left. So I have nothing to gain from this. I will receive nothing from fixing the mikvah, but I will get myself into extreme trouble. I'm already an older man. I've already suffered so much. Yet he didn't say it's not for me, let somebody else do it. He went and he put himself to it and he collected the money and he did the work that had to get done in order to make sure that the mikvah was available for the people in the community who needed it. So Rav Mendel took this idea to heart, this idea of being like this family that was giving the wood when they had nothing else. They were going to be giving the very last bits of wood away. And they were going to be doing it not for themselves, but for others. And the others were sinners. And it was not just enough to do it, but to do it with joy. This was the way Rav Mendel operated. This is the way Rav Mendel did things, and this is what we have to do. When we see an opportunity, we see something that has to get done, go and do it. Jump right in. Do beyond what we think we can. And even when we're going to get no recognition for it, we still have to do whatever we can in order to accomplish the goals that have to get done. So we need to have David. We have to have Yoav. Don't forget, take our insights from wherever we need to take it from in order to grow, in order to be the best person that we can be.